Hi, I'm Stephen Foskett from blog.fosketts.net and Tech Field Day, and I'm here at VMworld 2012 with a great group of former and future Tech Field Day delegates, along with Dheeraj Pandey from Nutanix, and we are going to talk about converged infrastructure a little bit. So let's kick it off. Let's start here at the end. If you want to introduce yourself, tell us who you are.
I'm Gabe from Gabe's Virtual World.
I'm Brandon Riley from Virtual Insanity.
Roger Lund, vroger.com, vbrainstorm.com.
Greg Stuart from vdestination.com.
I'm Bill Hill from virtualbill.wordpress.com.
Fabio from juku.it.
And Luca from VMware.it.
Dheeraj Pandey, co-founder CEO of Nutanix.
All right, very good. So we just heard discussion from Dheeraj, and obviously some of you have already talked to Nutanix in the past at Tech Field Day and at other events like VMworld. What do you guys think of this whole concept of converged infrastructure? That was one of the things that came up today in our discussion. Is this a good idea? Is this something people want?
In this market where Nutanix is positioned, absolutely. I can totally relate to exactly what you were saying about the hardware, the software, the finger pointing, wanting one person to own that, because in today's business climate, we don't have time for that. Our customers just want uptime, and it kind of translates to us having to change our paradigm a little bit, because we used to have to care about the specific components here and there, but it's almost to the point where we don't have time to deal with that because we've got a lot of sprawl and customers are demanding more uptime than ever. So I think it's awesome in this market.
And speaking to that, it really creates a predictable environment for support and for operations that you understand how it's going to work, and if you're supporting it, you understand how it should work, so you can determine how it's not working. So it makes sense, I think, for both sides.
But what I was surprised about is that you you told you're even selling to the application guy, which in my feeling is something that would never happen in a big environment where someone just says, well, we bought this, now you support it, to the IT guy. So I was really surprised in that.
Yeah, I think it's going in that direction with Exadata and Netezza and HANA and a lot of specific use cases around analytics, in-memory data and all that stuff, databases. This is basically just an extremely generalized use case of virtualization. So when I say application, I mean virtualization guys, cloud guys, those are the people who actually care who spend their infrastructure.
But that said, I mean, Hadoop, you've got, they just did come out with a Hadoop, I guess, version or application of the Nutanix product. And that is getting into that whole DevOps,
IT, yeah, absolutely.
The other side of IT, from the infrastructure people. And I think that's interesting that this is not just let's run some virtual servers. This is let's do more,
Absolutely.
And another thing that came out, too, when we were discussing was, who wants converged or infrastructure? Is it the small shops who don't have enough IT resources, or the big shops? Now, obviously, Nutanix is going after the heart of the market, not just the small guys who don't have the resources.
Yeah, if anything, I think we don't want to go after S in the SMB.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the mid-enterprise and above. The above guys care for all this multi-tenancy, software-defined storage, mechanism policy, because they are delivering infrastructure service to their customers or end clients. And the mid-market guys are just looking for a sheet metal wrapped stuff that basically just works. And I mean, metaphorically, I think of this as either you get a cloud from Amazon, in which case you get some specifications on the VMs and performance and CPU and memory and things like that, or you have a cloud that you own. Where if you have a problem, you will call Nutanix for support through remote tunnel and things like that. It's a distributed cloud in some sense.
So you said, you think that this would appeal to a larger company?
Well, I think there's probably a limit to how large, unless, like Gabe was saying, if you're going after people running a specific application. I mean, we hear a lot about the shadow IT and the people who are doing this stuff anyway. So I don't differentiate a lot between the people who are going out and purchasing, services from companies around IT and Nutanix. I mean, why not just go buy my own private cloud from Nutanix versus paying a monthly fee to whomever? I don't see the difference.
Yeah, I think that's well said. If you want to own it and you're like, well, I would still rather get a private cloud experience where I can call Nutanix for performance and reliability and availability issues.
But I see that if you want to sell a private, general purpose private cloud thing, you need to go after the infrastructure guys, especially in the higher hand of the market. And the guys that are selling like Oracle or SAP, they're selling their appliances to the application people because they're selling the application and not the infrastructure itself.
The word application is a little bit bastardized. I mean, for us, virtualization is an application. So you can
Yeah.
think of that as the cloud guys, the virtualization guys, the server guys at some level.
I can see more of your Hadoop platform to as more appealing to the application guys and have a good sell, just like Exadata and
Or like
whatever
VDI.
else. Or VDI.
Right?
Yeah.
So
That
these
would
guys
be
are
the
the
kind of
have-nots, they've
application.
never been part of the data center and they'd like to get something up and running and they have a problem, they call us.
Because when you would really be looking at application in a smaller way, then there would be a lot of unused resources.
Yeah.
Because the Oracle guy buys a box from you, and then the SQL guy also buys a box, and then you have a lot of overcapacity.
Yeah, no, I think we don't have to even assume that it's the application, it's the server guys. So I think point is server virtualization cloud. It's a top-down sell as opposed to a bottom-up sell of dollars per IOPS, dollars per gigabyte to a
But then you're
NetApp guy.
competing against VC with VBlock.
Which is fine. I think this is a $50 billion market. We don't have to compete with those big guys actually. I mean, there's enough for everybody. And
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Well, I think just on the greater subject of converged infrastructure, I think one of the biggest hurdles to any adoption is going to be breaking those silos. Because at some point now, what was traditionally isolated and has distinct ownership, especially in large environments, is now gone, right? They have to share. And so when you take something like Nutanix and you go into a medium enterprise to a large enterprise and you try and sell it, your storage guys are going to be freaking out because they don't have their tools. They don't have the ability to configure it anymore the way that they do the rest of the entire enterprise. And so it really becomes, adoption of something like this is very political, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's on the onus of the virtualization guy, if that's the application, to sell it to the company. Otherwise, you're just going to, stay in the same track you've always been in. I mean, things like UCS and VBlock kind of address that, right? Because they're highly integrated, thank you. But they all have their very distinct components with owners.
Yeah.
And maybe this is actually a good transition point from sort of the whole, is it a storage array, is it a server kind of question, to the bigger question of what are people doing with converged infrastructure generally? What are people doing with this stuff? Why do people pay extra for VMware? Because they get all the other services, they get all that other things. And not only that, a big thing that a lot of people overlook is they also get the ecosystem. Look at VMworld. Think about all those companies. If you are a company out there who wants to work with, I don't know how many it is, 100, 200 companies, whatever it is, if you want to work with those companies, guess what? Go buy VMware. They're getting more out of this than just a hypervisor. And that's pretty cool. But one of the things that Nutanix is doing is actually adding in some more of those features, though. So you're in that ecosystem, so you got that. But I think like storage DRS is a good point. I heard that you don't you can use the scale out file system instead of storage DRS. Is that a good thing? Is that something you want?
Well, once you
I don't care as long as
it works.
My latency is below certain levels.
Mhm.
I don't care how you deliver storage.
Because that's one of the most exciting features VMware has is DRS.
Storage DRS was implemented because it was fixing a problem of too many LUNs and the fact that they were not spilling over into each other and failing over into each other and sharing resources with each other and so on.
Now, that's another thing that you talked about too is scaling. And that's exciting to me. I mean, can you imagine? I would love to see the 50 node You know, I mean,
I would love to see the.
What
500
That's what I was
node.
thinking.
yeah,
Yeah.
500 node, exactly. Wow. You know,
Why?
I heard 1,000.
Because it's okay. On storage side, I'm convinced that the distributed file system that it works perfectly. So what's so excited about having 500 nodes running?
I just love the idea of having a massive pool of resources that I can draw on. That's all uniform. That I can
but
load
compare
balance
it
across.
to, for example, a big blade center.
Yeah.
Where you put in 50 nodes, 50 blades.
So the trouble there is that you have to have a storage array that can support
Yeah,
it.
he's probably excited by the storage
He's
portion.
storage
Yeah, I
side,
like
not the
storage.
compute
Because-
side.
You know, scaling storage is hard.
Yeah.
That's undeniable. Okay,
And I
everybody knows that.
think the
So I'm interested in where you're going with that, Gabe, because you're totally right that as a storage guy, I get really excited about scale out storage because that's one of the hardest things to do in storage is to scale it and actually scale it instead of just pretending to. As a server guy, what do you think about this? Is this a compelling thing, or is it just is it just a blade center?
Server-wise, it's to me just a blade center with less uptime.
Now, for the scale out part, though, it's an interesting cost because if you need to add more storage and more performance, you also have the requisite VMware license just to spin up your controller VM.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how that impacts the cost, how it compares to buying, another tray of, big vendor out there. But it's just an additional component that you may or may not
Also
need.
because
That's only. Sorry.
also because since they're using virtual storage, they need to compute anyway to power it up and to run.
Right.
And listening at the performances they're using, because they use Fusion IO for the first tiering, you need high computing to use it, the Fusion IO.
Yeah, and that's true. If you look at most storage systems, especially supposed scale-out storage systems, they have a lot of CPU in there.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of the
Underutilized.
new flash
Yeah.
and tiered storage systems,
Yeah.
I mean, they have crazy amounts of CPU. So much that a lot of the
And-
storage array companies are
Also
starting
a
to
lot
say,
of
what if we can run virtual
also a
machines
lot
here?
of amount of RAM
Yeah.
inside. They're basically big servers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the world is all going towards x86. I mean, all of EMC now is x86, as well,
Yep.
right? So the question is, do you want to physically keep these two tiers separate, or would you rather bring them together and then logically use a hypervisor to kind of keep them decoupled? Because then you get much better consolidation, much better
Yeah.
utilization.
The question I guess I have is, in a lot of scenarios in my experience is we end up building clusters around the use cases of the virtual machines, meaning that, if you've got a lot of 8Y CPU VMs, you need to build hosts that have a lot of CPU power. And then if I've got a lot of archive or, DVR or something like that, I need to have a lot of disk, and I don't really care about CPU. If I do that in this scenario, what's it going to look like if I was wasted either CPU or not enough CPU in certain areas, and how do I deal with hotspots and
Yeah,
all those types of things.
So you don't tend to look at the local disks as only being local to the, available to the local VMs, right? You'd rather just think of, well, we collapse the clusters, and there's a global resource of Fusion IO and global resource of Intel SSDs and global resource of Spindle HDDs. It's available for everybody. If anything, storage is at most one hop away, because you go through the 10 gig switch and come back, as opposed to being 5 hops away. You have to go to the top of the rack, core switch, another modular core, top of the rack, back to the storage controller. This is saying, at most, you are one hop away.
And I think that Roger probably the point that was trying to make is that okay, let's take away the storage from the equation, and let's focus on the other things like CPU and RAM. So you get the same configuration, okay, for each of those nodes. You can't just tune the CPU or have more CPUs inside the node. You just get that configuration. You can maybe add more RAM. Maybe.
By the way,
No,
I think we're focusing on the current version of the product, but that doesn't mean this is where the vision of the company is, or this is what the product will look like in the next 2 months, 3 months, whatever.
Okay.
I think
So you could make a fat disk one, or you
yeah,
could make a fat
absolutely,
CPU one.
Absolutely,
Okay.
you could, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I think let's not focus on today's version, because this is the version that had to validate the market, and now this is how products and businesses grow. They look at focus on one thing, do it well, make it stable, fast, all that stuff. Realize that there's a big market for this, and then they go and add bells and whistles. That's the way things actually work.
Some of those things
But,
are.
but I'm not afraid about not being able to having more servers with 4 CPUs or so. Everything we sell nowadays is 2 CPUs, and we just go up in cores. The latest model we sell is 8 cores.
It's not all the time, because
No, there are
if you had to
exceptions.
virtualize, especially high demanding applications, maybe applications that were
But
moved
those
from legacy.
high-dependent applications, I doubt if they're cost-wise effective on this
Yeah, I mean,
system, because you also get a load of storage you don't need.
Yeah, think of NetApp, right? I mean, from 95 to 2005, they were not powering all the applications. There was a really, really big market they went and addressed, which was not going after Oracle data warehousing and, the SAP workloads. I mean, till 2000, Oracle would scoff at NetApp saying, let's not even talk about any kind of benchmarking because NAS doesn't support databases. So you have to look at there's a huge market for a lot of other stuff other than the 64-core Oracle or 64-core SAP, which anyway will look like mainframe in the coming years. People will perhaps never virtualize these things. They're good enough, they work. Let's not lose our jobs trying to virtualize it and so on. And the rest will all become virtual, right?
I think the challenge there is, and if you go into some of that mid-market, is, they have a hard time bringing storage in unless it's for everything. They don't want to bring in 3 different types of SANs or, storage because they don't want to have to manage 3 different types. And,
for those guys...
but on the flip side, they might have 1 or 2 systems that are really high demand and not that easy to virtualize, and this makes it difficult.
Yeah,
but the thing, I mean, remember that this thing has Fusion IO cards in it that, I mean, I imagine that the storage in this sucker can outrun almost any storage array you could buy.
Yeah, unless on the storage side, I guess more.
That's the point.
Performance-wise, I don't see an issue.
Yeah.
But, issues may be a bit big, but what I'm trying to say is I buy 4 ESX hosts. And I get how much storage, for example?
20 terabytes raw.
Yeah. And then I need 1 server extra. And then I'm stuck.
No, you get another 5 terabytes. By the way, if you
Yeah,
buy,
but I also,
if you buy a,
so I'm also buying another 5 terabytes.
But
I'm
a
only
spindle,
using 1 terabyte.
a spindle today is a 4 terabyte. A SATA spindle is already 4 terabytes. So you have to start looking at what grain am I buying extra spindles.
So you could then just go switch out spindle by spindle.
No, I'm like,
Just buy
if
this.
you buy a rack-mounted server today, and if it has 1 SATA drive, it's 4 terabytes, 3 terabytes already. Right? So there's a single spindle that you buy with a rack-mounted server for local, say, boot disk or something like that. It's 3 terabytes. Right?
Yeah, but,
So what you're getting from us
I
is
mean
5
in
terabytes.
your system.
Yeah, you get 5 terabytes. So 3 and 5 are in the ballpark. You're not really getting a whole lot more storage than what you'd get with a single SATA spindle attached to a rack-mounted box.
So are you talking about granularly expanding the system?
Yeah.
Well, that's, again, on the server side, you've always been able to, always, as long as there's been, DRS, you've been able to granularly expand your VMware environment. But storage arrays, that's just a nightmare.
But what I'm looking at is from the server side that, so when I have my 4 slots filled with blades and I need a 5th blade, that I probably need to buy a complete new box.
No,
with,
not
with
a
extra
box.
storage.
An extra node
Where do they put it in?
a chassis, which is $300.
Okay, that's
right.
Also
so
because
I could use
You'd have to buy another chassis.
one
but it's a
chassis without
chassis. There is no
discs, with empty
backplane.
discs.
Yes.
There is no backplane
okay.
in that chassis.
Can you have a chassis without
It's a
disks?
container.
So you
like,
can have a chassis which is empty and just node.
Absolutely, and that could just have a boot disk and nothing else.
That's a big plus.
Yeah, so you could just have that. In fact, that storage controller will say I have no disks attached to me. So I need to actually route the traffic to my peers who actually have storage
And
attached.
still managing local virtual machine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's probably not a really great way to run long term, but you can get more CPU that way.
Yeah,
it
discs
depends.
are cheap, so
Yeah,
why not
exactly.
put the disk in
Yeah.
there and let it scale?
You're not getting
to
local
2
hits,
nets?
but you're still, probably doing good enough. I mean, it's being routed to 10 gig Ethernet.
Also because I'm not the storage
Like it
guy
already
like
is.
you, but adding 5 terabyte each time is so big scaling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's big scaling capacity, but
Yep.
performance.
But
Yeah,
1
but
terabyte
with
of
midlife
that.
customers, I'm fighting over $1,000. So adding disks or not is really an issue.
Yeah, you can. By the way, I mean again it's software defined, so the controller detects that. By the way, I have no disks attached to me.
Yeah.
I just had a boot disk where I booted from.
And that's
But-
on the Fusion IO.
The only thing it needs is a Fusion because the controller actually still needs to have metadata, so it scales the metadata.
So this is about a $75,000 purchase. That's a fairly high point of entry, but you were just explaining that maybe that's not so high for even a smallish company, right?
Yeah, because we often sell just 3 Cisco the rack-mounted models with a VNX.
Yeah, because you have to consider the storage. You're not buying servers. You're buying servers and storage.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh yeah, and you need the driver for the Fusion IO card installed in the image.
all that stuff comes with the stuff. So I mean, it's basically plug and play. You go ahead and you up and running in half an hour.
Will you be using the original Fusion IO driver, or is it one of yours?
No, just stuff that comes from Fusion IO. We don't change anything at all in the.
Yeah, okay. So I can just download the ESXi image from Fusion IO.
Oh, it comes pre-installed, so you don't have to do that either.
But I have to do some updates sometime.
Yeah, you can do that. So in fact,
You also have to reinstall sometimes the server. So I think you're giving us also the installation.
yeah, in fact, you could like 5.0 to 5.1. I think you could do that on your own. Or 5.0 something, you can do that on your own. It's rolling upgradable, so you can bring one down and the other one down, and so basically, just in rolling fashion, you can bring everything up without any service going.
And for what versions of ESX are you certified now?
5 and above. Yeah, we don't support 4.
And now we can say 5.1, right? It's okay to say that? Okay. Yeah. I wish we were saying 6. Oh well.
Next year. You should say .next.
Not next, yeah.
I think there's a clear differentiator here when you talk about converged infrastructure between companies that are doing it in stacks like vStart, VCE, versus the building block approach. You know, I feel like one is more converged than the other, and there's a clear advantage with the building block approach. Because going back to what Stephen said, you know, the ability to scale the storage nearly infinitely is very unique to, you know, this approach, the building block style approach versus the monolithic, you know, I hate to say hodgepodge approach, but
Shake and bake.
taking pieces and putting it in a rack, you know, it's more converged than, you know, the standard converged infrastructure that people want you to think is converged.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's way more converged. And that, but does that yield a substantive difference that customers would notice? Is it important that it's more converged?
To me, it's set up for the future because I don't believe that in 5 to, you know, plus years you can still sustain monolithic storage, you know, dual head or even, you know, 8-way or whatever. I think you're going to have a building block approach like these guys deliver, like XIO, you know, companies like that, because it is hard. And, you know, like guys like us, we don't, I think it's just much easier to be able to scale storage at the same time you're scaling everything else. It's a no-brainer.
I think it's
Well,
like
not easier is not the right point. It's much more desirable to scale storage. It's
us,
hard to
yes.
scale
Yes.
storage.
That's why I will love to see a software only version of that.
And
Yeah.
you
So
think
you
you
can
will?
choose how much you want to
Yeah.
scale.
Well, thank you very much, Dheeraj Pandey from Nutanix. All of you for joining us here at VMworld. I'm really, really glad that we had the support of companies like Nutanix to bring some Tech Field Day delegates here who might not otherwise have been here. And I hope that you who are watching this have enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more things like this, go to techfieldday.com. And if you're interested in learning more about Nutanix, they're easy to find as well, nutanix.com. Once again, I'm Stephen Foskett. Thank you very much.